Welcome to Oh Hell No with Nicole.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Oh Hell No. Today we have Ava Miles. She is an author, best-selling author, and we are going to get into her books where she writes these different guides, and they're called the Goddesses Guides, and I love it. So we're going to talk about her book, and we're going to talk about her, and we're going to have a good time today. Welcome.
Welcome. Yay. I love to have a good time, so I'm in the right place.
Yes, you are. So I'm going to start off just getting some background on, who you are. I read the book, but, the people don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So before you became an author, what was your profession, if you can say?
Oh, yeah. That's always the fun one. People are like, what? I was a conflict expert, and I rebuilt war zones and conflict-affected areas around the world. So it was like, what, 180?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. I, was from a small town, very conservative town in the Midwest, and no one thought you could ever make a living as a writer. And so I wrote, for myself, for a long time. And on one sort of singular night, in a very scary night in Sierra Leone, I was writing my first book, and I just thought I need to write my way to a better life because I thought these, street children who were outside soldiers were going to overrun my room, and I was like, I'm so happy writing. I loved working and helping people around the world, and I still love going and talking to people around the world. But there were some really scary and unpleasant sort of things at times, and you just couldn't help as much as you wanted to. So I wrote, and it worked, and here we are.
Yes. Wow, that is so interesting. So what made you want to write inspirational books for women? Because I find that, it seems like your books are geared towards us and just, uplifting us. So what made you decide to focus on that?
Well, like I said, in my old career as well, I feel like I've been wanting to help and support women like I wish I had been supported, I guess is probably the best way to say it. But just going and being the person who was always the cheerleader for so many people, and it, could have been in my personal life, but it was also in communities of war where, there was a lot going on. People were in serious hardship, and we were working on programs for them, for example, to empower women, say, in, a small sort of very traditional village in, say, in Congo, in Central Africa, and a variety of other places. Worked a lot in the Middle East to help empower women where there are a lot of barriers to their freedom and for them to actually be able to step out and be themselves in the world and make the kinds of decisions that sometimes we as, since I'm an American, take for granted. And so that sort of morphed into also just having a lot of, I call them divine rock star gifts because we all have our own unique gifts, but I have, healing gifts and other gifts that I suddenly was sharing with other people because I managed to turn my own sort of life around. I was very ill and almost died a couple times, one of which was in my mid-20s, and I literally became the most happy, healthy person because I was able to go on my own goddess journey, and all of a sudden I had all these people saying, how did you do this? And suddenly, after working, one-on-one and giving other talks and things, it just became so obvious that, I love to write books. I started out in fiction. I just needed to write down all of my experiences, all the wisdom that I had, all the things I felt that the divine was trying to bring through me to help other women in all the ways that, we sort of struggle with stuff, body image and, feeling like we deserve money and, toxic relationships and how do you have loving relationships. I wish these were the books that I could have read when I was just starting out in high school, and stepping into the world in a big way as an adult.
Right. So you said that in the book, you said that you always wanted to write. So even as a child, you loved writing, but your parents kind of said, no one makes money doing that. So maybe you should just focus on something else. But it's so funny that that's what you've always wanted to do. And you ended up doing that. I love that, because a part of my show was just finding out what leads people to their purpose and how they found their purpose. So I think it's great that you actually, went into what you feel like you were supposed to do from day one.
Well, I feel like that's kind of for me what it is to live as a goddess woman. It really is listening to yourself I mean, for me, there was sort of like a couple years as I was exploring, my own journey. It was like I really wasn't sure what made me happy. I mean, I was like, I knew writing, did, but I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and so I had to delete all those stories. And I think for me, that's the thing that I've realized about my own transformation. So much of what I've seen working with other people, and it's like how, and it's everywhere, right? I mean, how powerful the mind is in terms of what we believe about ourselves. And so letting go of the beliefs that someone gave you, because they might not be yours. The belief that I couldn't be a successful writer wasn't mine in the beginning. That was my parents, and they were only trying to be practical, right? That's their thing. And they're trying to be loving in their own way, but they just didn't realize that they told me a story that I took on, and I take responsibility, that limited me. Instead of saying, maybe you're going to be the one person who's going to succeed at this out of everyone we know, because we don't know anybody who does that, So I think that's the thing for me, is when you live in tune with that happy, power-packed goddess, you listen to that and you follow that, and you don't let any of the naysayers or other people who are well-intentioned tell you who you are. You just don't.
Yeah. So in your book, you said seeing yourself as a goddess woman was one of the most powerful shifts you've ever experienced. Can you tell us about that experience, how it manifested for you?
Absolutely. So for me, it really was one of those singular nights where I finally saw myself as a totally beautiful woman. And I don't just mean physically, but I was so happy to see that, because for a long time, I'd be told I was pretty, or, I wasn't that bad. I mean, I was told that too. Not really rude. The nicest of things.
Yeah, that's rude. You are pretty. I love your website and your picture.
Well, and I can claim that now. I can say, like, I can see that too, and I feel great, but I also feel beautiful now. But I could see this, it was this vision of this calm, it was me, calm, beautiful, just completely powerful woman, and not from a place of, we have these power, like, I talk about this in another Goddess Guide about personal power, but we have this impression that, you've got to be forceful to be powerful or assertive, and like, really, when you trust in who you are and that the universe has your back, you don't have that perspective. You just know that you're awesome, and like, when you're you, everything's just fine. And so that night, it was just like this huge, it was the first time I could see myself as that goddess woman, and I was like, wow, absolutely incredible. And so she was the one, when I would have, the bad hair day, or, I'd be a little pounds extra here or there, and I'd still be like, meh. Or I'd have moments where I'm like, man, I'm not feeling super empowered with my life right now. Or, like this day just sort of like,
Yeah.
I would say, okay, that's the one, that's the true me. And that was the person that I realized was like, that's my essence. And I was like, that's great, because it's living from that place of seeing yourself that way, as opposed to all the other images and all the other things that you started to, see about yourself, the pictures that you'd have that weren't you, that you didn't look great in because you weren't happy in that moment, or what have you. So that was such a turning point for me, because it really was fully, like, finally connecting, because I felt like I connected fully to that goddess woman inside me, and it was just like, wow.
So did this happen? I know that you meditate just from reading your book. Did it happen during a meditative state, or is it, how did it happen? Because for a lot of us, like, I try to meditate, but it's really difficult for me. I've been trying to master this for so many years, and I'm still not there.
Yeah.
So,
and I used to hear that so much. So let me just talk about that a little bit, because I've helped a lot of people with this. So we're just going to do something really simple. So one thing that I have found that's interesting about when people talk about teaching meditation is they talk about clearing your mind. Well, I was never taught meditation. I just kind of, I prayed a lot when I was a kid, and I kind of grew up, and it just sort of all worked for me, and I never had any stories about meditation. Well, one thing, I had a lot of people say, oh, I'm having trouble, and I can't do it, or I hate it, because, like, I just can't stop my mind. And what I realized is, like, if you get in touch with your heart and you don't go, because the mind is the one that wants to keep busy, but when you get in touch with your heart, even putting your hand over your heart or both hands over your heart, because I don't believe you have to sit up and meditate. All these rules are just, like, they're just a bunch of somebody else's stories. Do what makes you feel comfortable. I couldn't go and sit cross-legged for the longest time because of my injuries and illnesses. So I would lie down on the couch with my hands over my chest, and I just didn't, it was like, it worked out so perfectly. I didn't realize, but I was putting myself in touch with my heart. And that's why I always could just so easily meditate. It's like you fall into the trueness of you, and the heart always silences the thoughts, because that's where we start to feel loved. shift. And when we focus on it, even if it's something as simple as our heartbeat, we slow down. I can hear myself slowing down even as I'm doing this. Hopefully you are too. But I'm telling you, putting your hand on your heart and like listening to that heartbeat and just like, I mean, sure, you might have some thoughts, and it might take a little longer depending on how frantic your day was. My day was a little bit busier because I had a lot of errands, and I was at the post office for 30 minutes, which is never a happy place.
No, it's not.
For the most part, although I try. And but that's what I would say about meditating. And so this particular night, I have a feeling, I'm remembering that I laughed because it was a full moon, and I like to leave the curtains open because the moonlight's so nice. And I woke up in the middle of the night, which is kind of commonplace for me at times, because it's like if I have some big like thing that's going to happen, like it seems to be in the middle of the night when there's no one else to sort of like distract me, right?
Right.
So I just woke up, and it was like I meditated, and I just had this like vision, and that's just been a real blessing for me. So, but I mean, like I said, get in touch with your heart, and it will. I actually have that exercise in the back. It's the simplest way to drop into that space, that deep space of meditation. But also just like let go of the stories. Like if it's not working, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like not a big deal. You know, I think people start to like it. There's momentum that's built, and so it sort of snowballs. You know, people get frustrated, and they get tight. Then they start to feel bad about themselves if they've been conditioned to feel wrong. I know I'm raising my hand because I was conditioned to feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, and then and then you're like, you're the farthest thing from your goddess nature because you just are like, crap, I can't do this. And it's like, okay, that's not perhaps the perspective. Let's get back to the place of love. So anyway, that's like my little meditation 101. But I'm telling you, I've helped so many people with that, and they came back and were like, I can do it now. And I'm like, good job, you.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna do that. So I want to point out that you quit your full-time 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 you know, at 39 years old. And I'm pointing that out because a lot of people get discouraged about following their dreams and goals based on age. So I just want to say, you jumped out the window and you did this. I mean, you were smart about it. You saved money. But tell us what the first year was like for you as an author. How many books did you sell in the first 6 months? Like, tell us that story.
Golly, I'd have to think about that. So the other piece that I wanted to just mention is that I quit a 6-figure income, really successful career. And when I told other people, and also I like I said, I listened to my intuition, my goddess nature, and I dreamt that I was going to, I'd been planning, but suddenly it was like I dreamt that I needed to resign, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I woke up and I meditated, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm not sure when this is supposed to happen, but I know it's happening. And then 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from a VP in the company who was asking me to take on yet another very difficult war-affected country, which was Sudan. And I had already been doing Congo and Lebanon and a variety of other places, and I just clearly heard my guidance inside me was just like, and now it's time. And I resigned the next day. So I told people, you know, I was going to, and like I said, I had plans because it's important. I mean, you know, as someone who, I have another, you know, goddess guide about deserving money, as someone who, you know, really believes in deserving abundance and being a goddess moneymaker, you also need to be planning and smart and listen to your guidance about it because there's actions, too, that you need to take. So you're right. I quit my job in May. Everyone said, my God, that's the bravest thing I've ever heard. And then it was like implied that it was like crazy. And I had to just let go of those naysayers because I was like, I really believe in what I'm doing and I know it's divinely inspired. So I had planned, I had 3 books that I had written by the time I released that first book in July. And so I had planned to put them out. I put them out 6 weeks apart, and then I was like, I need some more books. So I wrote a couple novellas, and from July to December, I had 5 books out. Wow. And in January, I hit the bestseller list with my first book. So it was a little scary those first few months because, you know, it's like things were like gathering. I knew that I needed readers to have a place to go, for example, and that's why I planned to increase my platform, you know, because I also was like, I need to pay my mortgage. And I remember having a talk with my sister, one of my sisters one night, and I was just like, oh gosh, I was like, the mortgage, and I was like, I got my savings, but I'm like, I know that things are going to get better. I'm just like, still like, when are they going to get like really good where I can cover my expenses? I had friends who were saying, oh my gosh, you're making, like you're doing so great and you're selling these books and this, but I'm like, I'm not covering my mortgage yet. I'm like, I need to like be able to support myself. And so I said to her, I was like, wait, maybe I have to go and, work at Starbucks to have health insurance and such. And she goes, I just don't see you being a barista in your future. And we had a good laugh about it. Not that that's not a thing, because I know tons of authors and other people who are, working there because the health insurance piece is so great. But for whatever reason, I really studied the business side of being a writer. And there is a business side to it. There's marketing, and there's the financial sort of part, which was in addition to the writing. And so I just managed to really focus on those areas and thought, okay, I can apply myself. Even though this is different, there are skills that I have, because I really believe nothing is ever wasted in us. Every experience has the power and the possibility to help us at some other point in our life. We just may not know it at the time. So all my stuff with budgets really helped me. I was able to really work and think about budgeting. I was able to hire people as contractors to support me and help me in a way that a lot of people, don't even do. I mean, I asked for references, and people are like, I've never had an author ask for a reference. And I'm like, well, this one does.
Right.
So I think that's the thing, is it was just, we sort of just keep proceeding. And, for me, that first 6 months, there was a lot of growth. I mean, I never had been on Facebook. I'd never been on any social media, because, I was working in really insecure countries and on secure stuff. And I didn't want anybody to be able to find me out in social media. And, I was just I was so low profile. And the first time I had to sort of go on, I thought, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I mean, I was like, I don't know. And what's funny is Ava actually means voice, as I was reminded. And so I was told, Ava always knows what to say. And I was like, that's really funny. So you just keep learning, and you just keep believing. And when you have moments of fear, I'm actually writing about, it's called Goddesses Face Fear, and it's coming out in January, because I really felt like I needed to talk about fear, because it's such a powerful piece of our human existence, and it trips us up so often. It's like, how much does fear control us at times? And I just was saying, even with fear, you face it, but you also tap into that divine courage that we all have inside of ourselves. And so for me, I really had to dig deep. I mean, I used to say it's trust in all caps, and it was. But like I said, I just really believe that the universe supports you, especially when you know what you're doing is divinely inspired and you do it with excellence.
Yes, I highlighted that in your book. I just want to read it. It says, when you're a goddess woman living in alignment with her sole purpose, the whole universe rises to support you. Like you've heard before, the right people find you, you found me, and on a soul level, I found you. Listen to your intuition. It can never lead you wrong. I love that. Love. So
me too.
Do you self-publish, or do you have somebody else?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So talk about the universe. So my first book, I managed to get a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful agent. And she, it's funny, I don't know if you know who Nora Roberts is, but she's a very huge author, up there with, Daniel Steele, Nicholas Sparks, James Patterson. She hits the number one on the New York Times list pretty much with every book. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my first book was about an experience my sister had. When she was getting divorced, her ex-husband blamed their divorce on her reading too many Nora Roberts novels. And so this spawned this idea about what if I was like, this is a great book. What about writing a book about this? Well, I had to get Nora Roberts' permission. And so that first book, I got this great agent. We sent it out on submission, and everybody loved my voice, but they were like, well, we don't publish Nora. We're a little nervous about this. Her publisher was like, well, it's kind of a conflict of interest because, we already publish her, but we want to see your other books. And I was like, great. So my agent goes and suddenly up and says, I'm leaving the business. I mean, she'd been in the business forever. I'm leaving the business. I really believe in this book. You should just go and put it out yourself, because we both know how powerful it is. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that was literally about 2 or 3 weeks before I ended up quitting my other job. I mean, it was just the convergence of events was so huge. And I just had to sit down and be like, you're right. I believe in this book. I believed in this book from the beginning, and I'm going to figure out how to do this on my own. And that's kind of how it's happened. And it's worked so brilliantly. I've had other people, other publishing houses now, because, success always goes and attracts that, right? Mm-hmm. I've had them come and say, hey, would you, want a contract with us? But, I haven't been offered something yet that is better than what I'm doing, as in my own sort of way. But I have all my foreign rights, my translations. I've translated in 9 countries. One of which is just being signed, which is so exciting, this week, and so that's really exciting. So I am working with publishing houses overseas, and that's just been a great way to, because when am I going to translate my work into Bulgarian? I mean, I love my Bulgarian readers, but when am I going to translate into Bulgarian? So anyway, so like I said, and there's just so many different ways. I think that's the thing as a goddess woman too, is we get these ideas in our head about it having to be a certain way, and God knows I wanted to just be a traditionally published author. But the nice thing that it's allowed me to do is I have been able to release more books in a short period of time. I mean, I think I was talking with someone who was interviewing me last week, and I have 30 books out in 4.5 years. Because, and I've written my tail off. I mean, let me just put it that way. I've been very, dedicated to this, because this is, I've been launching myself in my new career. And I would never have been able to do that with a traditional publisher. Typically, you wait every 18 to 24 months for one book. Mm-hmm. And I probably couldn't have gone and paid my mortgage with that. I know a lot of authors who can't do that. Yeah. Unless it's a huge hit. And even then, it's not quite as much as you'd think, because the royalties are much lower. So it's worked out really nicely, and I also have the creative freedom to talk about the kinds of things, because I don't write to a formula. I don't write to a certain genre. I mean, the goddess guides, I'm writing about money, I'm writing about relationships, I'm writing about sex, I'm writing about creative expression and personal expression. I'm writing about all those things, and it's it's self-help, it's spiritual, it's okay. And it's but to me, you just write the best book. And then it just gets out there, because people that write to a formula, you always know as a reader. I've always said that. I used to know, and I'd be oh gosh, I don't like this formula. It's just try it over and over, and I'm I don't want to be that person. I was that's not who I am.
Right. So how do your book ideas come to you? Is it during meditation, or could you just be walking down the street, or do you pull from life experience? How do you get all this stuff together? Because your books are pretty meaty. It's not like you're putting out these little flimsy guides. You know what I mean? There's a lot of content in there. So how do you get that?
I do meditate a lot, no surprise. But I also, I have a divine formula in all of the books. And I was, I'd been being okay, I don't quite have this one piece in this divine formula for Goddesses Face Fear. And I was okay, and I've been meditating, and I was all right, it hasn't come yet. So I'm okay, I'm getting out of my own way. And suddenly I was just okay, it's time now. And literally I'm just standing there, and it just came to me, and I just laughed because I just asked. And so for me, since I do believe we are walking divine beings, we are always, if we choose to, we're just tapped in. And so I tend to go and get it from all sorts of places. I'll dream. I've dreamt chapters before. I'll see something that jogs my sort of creative passion, and it'd be okay, that's really important. Or someone will tell me a story, and it's so in alignment with what I've been talking about. This just happened actually with my editor, and it was just oh my goodness, it was they didn't realize that I was thinking about this, and they confirmed that yes, this is the direction. So to me, it's just paying attention, it's being open, it's listening. But the thing is, for all of those, for me at least, when it comes to writing, for all of those ideas, there is just a sense of peace and excitement, and sometimes pure joy, because it just feels so right.
Yeah.
It feels so right.
So in your book, you say sharing secrets helps us to be free from shame. Can you explain? Because I feel sometimes certain things should be between you and God. So what do you mean by that?
Do you want to give me a for example? Then we can go and be a little practical. You don't have to give a personal example, but give me a for example, and we'll talk about it.
I mean, I don't know. If maybe you did something really bad, and I don't know, it's not something that you're proud of, so you don't want to tell someone who might tell someone else, and then your business is in the street. Maybe that was you years ago, but you're a different person now. Maybe you slept with someone's husband or something like that.
Right.
And
right. Okay, well, let's take that. That's a really good one because I went to a massage probably like a year and a half ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I always, because I just love people and I always feel like connecting is so important, I started to talk to this woman who was giving me the massage. I'd never ever met her, and I have not met her since. And I was telling her, I was talking about how I feel about empowering women and like my books and such. And she ends up, because it just kind of happens, people tell me things, she ended up confessing that she was in an extramarital affair and she was feeling really bad about herself. And she was having trouble stopping it, but she also knew that she needed to do something about like deciding she's going to be in her marriage or she wanted to leave. And so I'll just take this. I won't take her as an example, but I'll just take that as an example. So one thing that I have realized, and this is because, I was raised with secrets in my family too. My dad's an alcoholic, and that was a really difficult one, is that you end up going in sort of bringing all this shame and all this magnified energy about feeling and being wrong. And it's not to say that there isn't something that you will want to forgive yourself for and that you will want to ask forgiveness for example, of someone else. Say, for example, in an extramarital affair. If you're really sorry, and hopefully hurting someone else, being a goddess woman, hopefully you'll recognize that because, that's just part of, we come from a place of love and compassion. And if we have hurt someone that we have said that, we loved and that we wanted to be faithful to, and we didn't do that, then, that's something that we have to decide how we're going to handle that. But if there's forgiveness to me is like the key. But in terms of a secret, so let's just take that. Say the woman goes and has an extramarital affair. Actually, I was just writing about this too. And she holds that secret for her entire life, or what have you. I had this happen with a woman. I used to be a hospice volunteer, and I'd been told about deathbed confessions. And this woman who's dying, and I'm sitting with her and holding her hand, and she says, "I have to confess this because I've been carrying this weight for my whole life. As I had an affair when my husband was at World War II." And I have never told anybody. And she's like, I don't want to meet God this way. But she's like, I'm also so scared to meet my husband because I know he'll know now. And I was so like, whoa, 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 whoa. So the one thing I think about secrets is it puts us in this protective space. And the thing is, for me, when it comes to a secret about ourselves or someone else, we're kind of cloaking ourselves a little bit in a feeling of wrongness. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that we haven't done something that we regret or that wasn't from our highest place, but if we don't forgive ourselves, we can't move forward and be happy. And we can't move, how should I put this? We can't move to a place where we're willing to teach our experience to someone else when it comes about. So say, for example, the woman that I talked to, who literally, the masseuse, who literally was crying, and she said, "You have no idea, I've been praying for someone to talk to, and here you are." And she's like, "I really feel like you're giving me more today than I'm giving you," because she's like, "You're the answer to my prayer." And so if we're not willing to share our secrets, and that's the thing, is they're not even our secrets, they're just our experience. Yes, I'm a human being, and yes, I made this mistake, and yes, I learned from it, and yes, let me tell you how I got to that place, and maybe you might make a different choice. And it's not even that the person has to make a different choice, you just share your humanness. Because we've all had moments where we haven't done things from our highest place. We've been impatient, or we've snapped at someone, or heaven forbid, I have a very dear friend who married a man that she didn't fully realize what he was capable of. And I hear that from so many of my readers, abused women who go into a marriage and they don't really realize who they've married, and then they feel like they're stuck. They have children. They're afraid to leave because of financial security. They don't know what else they would do, and they also are terrified to tell anybody what's happened to them. So, every goddess woman has to decide how she wants to live, but I really do believe shame is such a low vibration, and it sucks us down to where we really don't believe in ourselves. It's like it strips us of who we really are, and if we can't step a little bit forward into love and forgiveness for ourselves and for our choices, it's really hard to continue to move forward in the truest, happiest sort of way that we can, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying it's easy. It is really hard to look at a serious mistake. I mean, I have a dear friend who's going through a divorce, and she has to forgive herself for not seeing what he was over and over and over again. And she's going to get to a place where she's finally going to let it go the whole way.
Yeah.
And it's a process, it's a process. But secrets really do, they prevent us from connecting, both with ourselves and with other people.
Yeah, and also I think that goes to when you said you have to forgive yourself. Sometimes you have to forgive other people who, may have done something to you, which you carry around, and then that prevents you from living your goddess life,
Yeah, and I'm not saying get on Facebook and,
right.
tell everybody, that you've had, an extramarital affair.
Right.
But if you end up sitting on a plane with somebody who, suddenly starts to say, I'm going to make this, I feel like I'm making this really bad decision. I'm going away with this man that is not my husband for the weekend. And you can take her hand and you can say, I've done that, and it really hurt me, and it really hurt the man that I was married to. And, if you love this person, that's one thing. And if you feel like he's your future, that's one thing, and you'll have to decide how to move from that. But if you're just doing this because you're in your life, you're bored or you don't feel fulfilled, that's the time to look at what is it in you that needs to sort of you need to sit with and you need to reflect with, and maybe you need some counseling, maybe you need some help. But this isn't the way, at least this isn't the way that I would say if I could be in your, if I was in those shoes, if I could make that choice over again, I wouldn't make that choice. And like I said, it's not always to give advice, it's also to give compassion.
Right.
As well. And so, I'm not saying tell somebody not to do something, but there are certain, and I say this, and I said this to other people too, there are certain acts that we can do as human beings that we know will have a destructive effect on someone else. Mm-hmm. We just know it.
Yeah.
Hitting another person, especially a man hitting a woman, that's destructive. Having an extramarital affair, I don't know anybody, and I know a number of people who, have experienced that. I don't know anybody who says, oh, yeah, that was easy. I mean, that is such a betrayal,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so for me, it's those are those pieces, and it's you have to kind of decide where you want to live from, and if those are the thoughts that you're having and those are the draws that you're having, because sometimes we attract these sort of moments of decision. I really feel is how are we going to choose to live our life, and maybe we're so unhappy in our marriage, and this really attractive man comes along, and he fulfills this part of us that we haven't felt fulfilled. But the truth is we need to fulfill it in ourselves, because that man could change too.
Right.
That could go in sour in 5 years, and suddenly then it's well, what do we do? Have another man show up?
Right.
And some people go down that track, but that's a track of self-loathing in some ways too, because you have to believe that you're beautiful and have your own worth. You can't put that in the hands of another. It's nice to go and have them say that you're lovely, but at the end of the day, a lot of people don't believe it unless they believe it about themselves.
Yeah. So share your secrets when warranted, and if they can really help someone else, don't go around putting your business on Facebook and Instagram
No. I mean, unless of course you're really at a great place, and
right.
The Harvey Weinstein scandal. I mean, look at all the wonderful women who are stepping forward now. I mean, beautiful stories, and you want to talk about the potency and the power, the negative power of secrets. Look at that situation, and if someone had just decided to come forward, even more than I remember this one particular person, Glenn Close, just came out and gave a statement, and she lives in my community. I haven't met her, but I always have really admired her, and she said, I knew about this, and she's like, I feel bad that I didn't do something. And then I love Angelina Jolie coming out saying that she told other women about his reputation because it was her way of protecting them so that they wouldn't step into a situation like her. And I think that's beautiful. So to me, you don't have to always go out the big way, but there are ways, like I said, there are moments of opportunity that we have to share something that some people would call a secret that helps somebody else.
Oh,
and you
absolutely.
say okay, you know what, that's to me where the light shines, and that's the light that that we really naturally have inside of us as goddess women that we want to allow out.
Love that. All right. So explain, you use this phrase a lot in your book, transmute, clear, and delete. Explain to us what that means.
Yes. So I'm all about root causes. Get to the root cause and move it out of your brain, of your energy, of your system, of your life. So for me, when you start to look at what your stories are, the things that are really locking you in place. For example, what's one thing, I'll just ask you, Nicole, what's one thing that you really, really want to do that you don't feel like you can do yet?
This is going to sound funny, but write books.
Okay. I kind of felt like that might be it.
Yeah. So
okay. So let's go and let's take this and let's use this as a great example. So, why do you believe that you can't write books?
I just feel like, oh, how do I put it together? Are people going to be interested in what I have to say? You know, are these books going to sell? Do I have the time? Just everything that I can talk myself out of it.
Okay, so, and let me go a little deeper. Did anybody tell you, either growing up or recently, that you weren't a good writer?
No, people usually say that that's my strong point, but I personally don't believe that it is, because I see a lot of room for improvement in my own writing, you know?
Okay, so you're a good self-critic like a lot of us.
Yeah.
I totally get it, because I've been struggling with this recent one. I've just been my best friend who's also an international bestseller, she's like, you always say this, and she's like, and I used to say it too. First chapter is terrible. You don't exactly know where it's going, but she's like, it always gets better because you just keep going, and she's like, it's just part of it. Right. It's not always perfect the first time. She's like, but F perfect. Who cares? Put it on the page. All right, so let's take one of those stories that say, the one about you can't, put it together, or people don't want to go and read what you have to say. So I would unpack that a little bit more. I would say, why don't you believe that people want to hear what you have to say? I tell every, newbie writer or aspiring writer, your voice has meaning in the world, and your books are meant to be read because they're from your heart. And when you believe that, there's no stopping you. There's no stopping you. It's something that I've had to struggle with inside myself too. And once I made that sort of transition, it was like, yeah, I love this. And what I'm giving every word is literally from my heart, every single part of it. And that is beautiful, and that's me in the world, and that deserves to be loved and respected too. And it's just worked out so beautifully. So you take the story, we'll just take this one. You don't believe that you, what you would write would be read, or that you can't put it together. And then what I do is we get into the root cause, right? Mm-hmm. And there probably are more root causes that you can uncover when you sit with yourself and maybe journal. I always find you ask yourself the question too, and suddenly your ego pops out the belief. I'll just say one, I suck. Suddenly you hear I suck, and you're like, whoa. My ego believes I suck, and that's that other part of you, right? The non-goddess part.
Right.
And so sometimes through asking that question, it's like, oh wow, what belief do I got going on right now? It's like, I suck. I'm like, oh, well, let's get rid of that, shall we? So what I do and what I've learned to do, and I've learned it from spiritual teachers, but I also learned it with myself, is you forgive yourself for believing it. And then you transmute and you delete and you clear that thought. And every thought, because we're all energy, right? Every thought has energy. So think of, and I always use this sort of example. Think of when your parents or your caregiver, when you were a kid, what was the one thing that they would say to you that would stop you in your tracks?
My mother used to just look at me, honey.
Okay.
No, but you better not do that.
Okay, right. So you better not do that. That has such energy, power, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to, oh, I think I'll clip that bonsai tree. Mm-hmm. And I use that just because it's so funny. They're both words, they're both sentences, but think of the energy behind the one with your mom.
Yeah.
So the same thing is true of those beliefs, of those limiting stories that we've got inside of ourselves. There's such power to them, especially when they come from someone else. Especially someone who we love and who we trust, like my parents, just naturally saying, well, nobody could make, money as a writer. Nobody could be as a career. Or, I know some people have said, that's not a respectable career. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a nice story. Glad I'm not taking that one on. You clear the energy, that's with the words, because words have such power, and words frame our identity. They frame our conception of self. That's why, language, with kids, is so exciting to watch. But that just shows the power. It's the things that they look at. And I always go and I loved asking people, what was your first word? Because that will tell you a lot about who you were in that moment and what kind of circumstances you were in.
Okay.
Mine was no. No surprise. I had a friend who, she was in a war-affected country. Her first words were, watch out. I was like, wow. And then I've got, my little niece is like, it's like, Mama. And I'm like, oh, yeah, because her mom's so lovely and happy and nice,
Right.
But, like, it's the power and the energy. And so you're clearing the power and the energy. And, again, if there's a lot of energy and it goes deep within you, like, it's very well rooted in terms of, like, your belief structure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, you have been believing for a while that, oh my gosh, like I'm not as good of a writer as this person, or I'm not going to be able to sell like this, or what have you. And those comparisons come in, but I always say that those comparisons are like the biggest thing that can eviscerate our goddess nature. Comparison's like one of those things that's like, oh my goodness, you got to just live in your lane and be you, and trust in that, right?
Yeah.
So the clear, delete, transmute, like it literally is, I call it the special reclaiming exercise for a goddess woman. You just get yourself, it's like, taking the malware off your computer and resetting your hard drive. The hard drive is you, because our natural state is really that goddess state. We're wired to our divine nature, and we came in this world with no stories. We came in this world believing we were wonderful. We came in this world knowing that we deserved, and we were just loved. We didn't even question whether or not we deserved to be loved. We just were. And then things happened.
Right.
And that's the thing, right? That's the energy. And so you're clearing those things that have happened, those experiences, those words, those harsh critiques, sometimes the ones obviously that even come from us. And once you keep doing that, it's just a simple reclaiming exercise, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, I love that. So, is the God man just the man to the goddess, or what is the God man?
Yeah, a goddess woman. I mean, like, it's so funny because we have such, I've talked about it so much in the Goddess Guys. We have such a conception about the masculine god. So when we call it a god man, it's almost like, ooh. But goddess woman, like, it's so funny. It doesn't have quite the same energy, and I kind of laugh about that. It's sad in some ways too, because, well, there you go. It's like there's this patriarchal energy, and like calling him a god man. It's like that was like, well, you're going to equalize. It's like goddess woman, god man.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think that's great. Easy. Yeah, that's a great
let's just be easy about it. But some people are just like, I can't call myself that. I mean, I was like, and then I had another man who was, he even corrected me. He was like, don't you say that the Goddess Guides are only for women. He's like, I'm a God man. He's like, and I love them. He's like, I think men can get so much out of this. He's like, yes, there's some stories for women, but he's like, it's going to make you think about the stories that we have that are unique to men. He's like, we need these books. And I was like, yay, good for you. Yay, I love that.
Yeah, that's right. I love it. I love thinking of my husband as the God man. Like, I'm your goddess, you're my God man. So, I mean.
Well, yeah, because he's a divine being too.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. I use these conventions. I mean, we are duality. I'm a man, or I'm a woman, and he's a man. And it's like we have these conventions. And so for me, talking about being human is great, but there are unique situations and circumstances that we experience both as a man and a woman. And I felt like we needed to talk about those. Whole systems get in place, that sort of deal with that. And it was like, we need to talk about how do we ground into that divine part of us in the midst of this duality, and how do we do it in the best way? And so for me, it's like acknowledging those pieces that, for a goddess woman, like we have to face, just like, I was talking with my CFO yesterday, and he's a God man, and he was talking about his own frustrations with the whole Weinstein thing, being like, I hate this because not all men suck. He's like, not all men sexually harass women. He's like, and I'm really outraged, and I want to do something, and I don't know how to help, and I was like, way to go, you. And he actually ended up giving me this fabulous idea for an article that, we're going to pitch this weekend, and it's like, that's so great. And I was like, look at you going and embodying your God man. He's like, that still makes me really awkward.
That's really awesome.
But I'm like, but that's the thing, is like he was wanting to come from a place of love and action, and to really go in and change something for the better, and be a goddess. I call them goddess supporters. That's my other thing, is when they're really being that, they're goddess supporters. But yeah, they're totally divine beings. They're totally just in a man's body. So I love that.
Yes, I do. So I just want to say to everyone, I forgot to mention this in the beginning. Ava's book that I'm referring to is Goddesses Deserve the G's. Relinking Self-Worth with Material Abundance. That's the book that I was reading. I mean, she's an international best-selling author. She has a bunch of goddesses, guides. So this is the one that I'm talking about, just to let you guys know, because I've been referring to the book and they're probably like, what? Which one is it? So I just want to say that. So now I want to talk a little bit about money. In your book, you say we shouldn't talk about, well, you don't say we shouldn't talk, but you kind of say that that's something that's out there, that we shouldn't talk about making money, right? And for me, I always feel like you should keep your finances to yourself. So tell me what your feelings are about, conversations about money.
Sure. Well, this was so interesting because having become a best-selling author and having been in conferences, for example, with other writers, and someone goes and says how much they've sold or how much they made in a year, for example, and other people start being like, well, blah, blah, good for her, show off, yada, yada. And it's like, I just remember being so shocked, like, whoa, like, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking, like, I want to get up and cheer for her because yay you, good for you. And she's also saying, like, I can do it, so can you. And that's kind of how I look on it. But I came across this really interesting article in a major financial magazine as I was writing Goddesses Deserve the G's and doing some research, and it actually said that there was a study that was done in which the researcher discovered that it was considered more taboo for women to talk about money than for women to talk about sex.
Really?
And I just remember sitting back in my chair, and I was like, holy crap. Like, holy crap. And some of that is related to a story that men get uncomfortable when women are powerful and when women actually have money and that women have more money than they do. I talk about that, for example, even, Goddesses Deserve the G's a lot. Like, how do you navigate that situation? Like, are you in a marriage, for example, in which when you start making more money than your husband, is he supportive of that? Or is he in his own thing about, I've got to go and make more money because that's what the man's supposed to do? I'm like, there's so many stories about this. So for me, you don't have to broadcast some of that, but at the same time, we shouldn't be ashamed of it either because, like, we really need to model, I feel, at least for me, we need to model that this is possible for women.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love how much Oprah has modeled what's possible for women when it comes to both being a businesswoman as well as someone who's a spiritual person. I mean, like, how phenomenal is that as a model? And, like, why don't more of us get up and say, you know what, I followed my heart's desire. I listened to my guidance. I did the planning I needed, and I became successful at this thing I love. That's my story. And so, like, for me, it was like I was like, I need to tell other people because this is a point of empowerment. If I can do this, so can you. Like, whatever your stories are, like, let me tell you what my stories were. And we don't have to compare them, but, like, maybe you should go and, like, realize that this is possible for you.
Right.
And so that's the reason that I started feeling like, I think it's coming at it from a different place, right? And it's changing our perspective. The more that I tell people that, I was able to go and, like, make over $1 million as a writer, like, the more people think, oh my gosh, well, she can do it. Why can't I?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. And so I was like, there's nothing to go and be ashamed of. I mean, it's just like, yeah, I have millions of readers, like, readers buy books. That's, like, my thing. There's this energy that's exchanged. It happens to be money, and it's wonderful, and it has allowed me to, like, do so much more with my business, with my platform, and I'm so grateful for that. But there's no reason that there's no reason that anybody can't do what I've done. It may look different. It's just how much you decide to do it. And so for me, it's like, let's just celebrate other women being successful because, my goodness, watching and hearing other women take other women down or judge them for being, like, vocal about their success or what have you, like, that breaks my heart. Like, that breaks my heart. Yeah. I had female bosses who were jealous of, like, younger women coming up the ranks. And they tried to make things miserable for some of us because they were so scared of whatever was that we were bringing to the thing, or they weren't going to be the only woman who was the expert anymore, who was, like, in management. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be zero sum. We need to hold hands with other women, and we need to support them, and we need to cheer them on, both when they succeed, but also when they try and it doesn't quite work that way. We encourage them again. Keep going. Keep following your dream. You're going to go and you're going to get it. Right. Because, gosh, like, why wouldn't we want to do that? Why wouldn't we want to be that kind of a person?
Yeah, I agree. I just want to put a little disclaimer out there. People, don't go telling people your salary on your lunch break. This is kind of like next level stuff. So like,
oh, well, yeah. I mean, if you're in a company
right.
in which, like there's some raises and things, but at the same time, I'll be really frank, there were some there were some women who, like, I worked in a company where there was a lot of openness about salaries because that was the leader of the organization. He was very transparent. Men and women made the same money for the same job. He was fabulous about it. Go to another company, there's so much secrecy, and people always find out. There's something that's left on the server in a shared drive, and suddenly it was like the men were making so much more than the women, and that is a secret, in my opinion, that is well served to get out. And if you think that you're not going and getting as much because you're a woman, there are ways to find that out. And I will just say, don't be afraid to tell other women what you think that base salary is in the marketplace, because you might be helping them actually get what they deserve in terms of a salary. So always listen to your intuition. I mean, there are no absolutes about any of this, but I can think of one situation in which secrecy has really served the higher-ups in terms of perpetuating that level of inequality. And there are ways that we need to go and listen to ourselves and saying, if this is a situation which I need to go and be transparent because it's going to help other people, we need to sit with whether or not that's the best course for us.
Right. Yeah. Because I think that, I was talking to one of my friends at work, and she was saying how one of the other ladies told about her salary or what someone else was making or something like that. And it just started a bunch of nonsense in the office and resentment and, negativity. So I just feel like sometimes you just have to be careful. I wouldn't go around the office telling people my salary, because honestly, it's none of their business. They can't do anything with my salary. I can't do anything with their salary.
Right.
So, I mean, but, if you're fighting for your right because you know that, you deserve a raise or whatever. And this kind of segues into my next question, which was your stepping up our money talk. So you addressed that section in your book, and I just wanted to ask you, what's the best way for women to ask for raises? Because I know I have someone in my life right now that was telling me that they've been getting a lot of extra work for over a year, and they were promised, a conversation about increase, and nothing has happened. And I'm like, you got to speak up. So what's the best way in your opinion?
Yep. Oh, I've been in that situation before. Yes. And I talk about that in Goddesses Deserve the G's, because I really wanted to give practical advice that I've both used as well as given to other women successfully. So for me, one thing about asking for a raise is you need to come with your facts. You need to come with the facts about your performance. Male managers especially, but female managers too, they have to make a case to sometimes other people when they're making raises, and they have to justify stuff. The more you can give numbers, say for example, you can monetize and say, in terms of, I've added 30 new clients this year to, this particular thing. There's been an increase in productivity. Say it's been 25%. Or maybe you've been able to say how much money you brought in. For example, I was able to when I worked in my old career, because we made contracts, we had to go after government contracts. I would say, I brought in this many millions of dollars this year, or my win rate was this much. You bring in those, as well as your qualitative things. For example, this person sent this email saying how much they valued me on this team, and you attach those things as evidence, basically, to your manager, and you say, I would really like to go and have you look at this, because usually if you have a performance evaluation, it's annual. Hopefully this is the type of thing that's going to come up, and typically you can ask what the raise sort of leeway is, but you also can do your homework. You can ask other people in the company, what are raises looking like this year, because usually they have to give that stuff. If raises have been capped at 7%, which I remember happening in our company, they were very transparent. The highest raise was 7%. And it was okay, that was just well known. But it's in companies where there's not as much transparency is where this wiggle room and also sometimes the abuse comes about.
Right.
So have your facts in place. Come in as unemotional as possible. Don't get into victim blame language, because that's just going to put their back up. You want to go and be as open-minded as possible. You're going to want to state your case. You want to say how much you really enjoy working and doing what you're doing, and that you want to keep doing better, but you really feel like you've had a great year, and you're so excited to, see what, type of raise he's going to consider for you or she's going to consider for you. And that's what you do. If your friend, like your friend who's in a situation which has been promised, what are the reasons that it's been promised but it hasn't happened? Are there financial things in the company that, have been delaying that? The manager probably should have shared that. And if he hasn't shared that, then, or he or she, then there might be something else, which is he actually doesn't want to, or he or she doesn't want to give the raise. And that may be his thing. That may be something that, he just doesn't do with other people. It's hard to say. And so sometimes you have to leave. I mean, I remember struggling with someone, and I was like, you know what? I deserve more. And I'm not going to sit here and continue to sort of be promised this. Don't jerk my chain.
Right.
I'm doing great work. And if you don't value that, again, getting back to goddesses deserve the G's, relinking to self-worth, I deserve better, and I'm going to go out and get a job of my dreams because you're not seeing how great I am, and that's on you. But I'm not going to sit here anymore. So I think you just have to sort of see. But to me, it's being as factual as possible, having the kind of evidence, having people write emails on your behalf that you can annotate to the document, giving them as much information to justify and to persuade them.
Okay, that's great advice. And also, people, in this book, she touches on stay-at-home moms, and she gives some great advice on, how to maybe feel worthy. I don't want to give it away because I want people to read this book. So I just want to put that out there because I thought that was a really great section that you put in, because I know a lot of, stay-at-home moms that,
Yep, absolutely.
So I wanted to talk about crystals. Because you touched on crystals in your book, and I never thought about those. My daughter, she loves rocks, and I'm always
I never had either until, things happened.
Yeah, so I want to know a little bit more about these crystals. Where can we buy crystals, energy crystals, and how do you know which crystals you should be using?
Oh, gosh, yeah. So this, I always just laugh because so much of what has become very helpful to me was stuff I poo-pooed, too woo-woo, too this, too that, then something suddenly happens. So the short story on the crystals part, which I actually share in the book, is I was in Egypt in the Valley of the Kings for a couple days, and I went to this alabaster factory, and alabaster is this really beautiful stone that is often hand-carved with wax into vases that are actually beautifully transparent. You put a light in them, and it's oh my goodness, it looks like it's amber. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I'm in this factory, it's not even a factory like we have here. It's this small metal shed with probably, maybe 5 artisans. It's very small, but it's a factory, in that part of the world. And suddenly, I get so excited. The translator on our trip is, sharing this. And I'm an artist. I'm a potter, and I love to sculpt. And I'm so excited, and I'm so oh my gosh, their work is so beautiful. And look at this. I'm holding it up to the light. And as I was leaving, these 2 Egyptian men came very, very respectfully, and they spoke Arabic, and my Arabic is really, really basic, and I didn't understand what they're saying. But they both extended these 2 pieces of alabaster to me, and they bent, they sort of bowed to me, and they extended it, and I knew that they were giving it to me as a gift, and they smiled. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I took these back to my hotel, and as I'm leaving Cairo, I was like, my gosh, these rocks are heavy, and am I really bringing them back? But I couldn't throw them away. And so a couple years later, I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm working, and my guidance was you need to just pick those up because, I have guidance, and sometimes it's very clear. And I picked them up, and I could feel the energy in them, and it was so crazy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's energy in them, and it's crazy. Oh my gosh. And then I looked up what alabaster was, and alabaster inspires more love and forgiveness inside of ourselves. And that was at a time in my early goddess transformation where I really needed a lot of help with forgiveness of myself and of the circumstances that have happened, especially around illness and things, and feeling I'd just been abandoned by God, things that were stories that just I needed to let go of to move forward. And so suddenly I'm oh wow, there's these, and I had a friend who she's oh, I love crystals. She's try this one, and so I'd hold it, and I could feel the energy, and I'm okay, this is really weird. So what I usually say is go to a bookstore, New Age bookstore or a spiritual bookstore, because typically they'll have a little bit of crystals, and see which one pops out? I mean, literally, what pops off the shelf? What color is the one? Like, you will just be you'll gravitate towards it, and then take home make sure you get the name, and then go and look it up online, because I will tell you 100%, because this has happened with so many people, including me. You will take it home, you will look up what the energy is, and you will be like, oh my gosh, that has been like what I've been working on or what I've been struggling with, and it's like the perfect little helper, and it's amazingly crazy. I mean, it's just so crazy. It's like when you've read your horoscope, if you've ever read your horoscope, and you have this moment where you're just like, oh my gosh, it's like they knew.
Yes.
I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, and then I'm like, well, yeah, because the divine created the planet, right?
Right?
The planet has all this great supportive energy. It grows stuff, like crazy stuff, right? I mean, there's just so many great things that come from the earth, and it's like, why would I have a story that that's just so crazy? Why am I not going to just say, okay, well, I'm just going to let go of my judgments and be like, okay, yay, this works for me.
Yeah. And then I wanted to bring back up something when we first started talking. We were kind of talking about relationships a little bit, and I wanted to bring this up because I had a conversation with someone last week, and she asked me, what is a deal breaker for me in a friendship? And I said, well, if someone disrespects me, I'm done. And she was like, well, I kind of feel like if someone, sleeps with my husband or hurts my family, those are deal breakers for me. But I feel like maybe we shouldn't be so quick to, throw people away or, end relationships. And I said, well, but we're getting to a certain age in our lives where, our tolerance for abuse and nonsense is just very short, so you kind of see the signs, and if they're there, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done with this. What are because you're such a positive and, enlightened person, like, what are the cutoffs for you in terms of bad friendships or relationships that you just don't think are worth your time or energy?
Sure. Well, I've kind of changed my perspective on that, because I used to have that. I used to feel bad. Like I understand where your friend is, because it's like I didn't want to throw away a friendship, especially if it had been long standing. I had all these stories about loyalty and hanging in there, because I was raised Irish Catholic. You just hang in there even when it's like the worst of the worst, because that's what you're supposed to do. And it's like, who made that rule up? Right. You're not supposed to give up on people, and people aren't disposable. Blah blah blah. But what I finally realized after literally going and meeting, going to this group with these other women who I just couldn't click with them. I couldn't connect with them. I didn't really we just weren't making the same life choices. I was trying to make, for me, ones that made me really happy, and they were just kind of wanting to talk and gossip about people, and it was just that was just not where I wanted to be, and I didn't want to judge them. And so what I just decided was, and this is how I looked at it, I suddenly just realized we weren't a good match.
Right.
We just weren't a good match.
Yeah.
And it took away the judgment, and I was like, this is really good. So for me, when I get to a place, and this has happened, recently, even with people, is when people, for me, stop going and choosing to be themselves, and they start going and choosing drama. That's a big one for me. Negativity. When they start trying to, I'll just put it this way, order you around, and you're like, wow, okay, I don't need you to mother me. I don't need you to, tell me all the things that you think my life should be. I give you the freedom to do your thing, and give me the freedom to be mine. I think the other thing is when people don't get in contact with you when you have had a major milestone. For example, the one, I can just tell this one, I had all these supposedly wonderful, close writer friends, and when I hit the bestseller list that first time, not a single one called me, emailed me, or contacted me to congratulate me. And I am telling you, it was so hurtful. I could not believe it. I literally could not believe it. I went around for a month, and I was so sad, because I was just I was so disappointed in that. And I knew some of it was them, they were just in their own space. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to have friends who can't celebrate me.
Right.
But I also will tell you, the other part for me is I really believe in equanimity. I had to go through sort of my list, and because I was like, man, I think I would have friends, and I'd be like, but they were always draining me. There was always like them, and I always felt like I was being their helper and their counselor. But if I ever had a problem, they'd be like, well, like, you can't have problems because if you can't like handle your life, none of us can. And it's like, what do you mean?
Right.
Like I'm a human being too. So if I can't share like myself and my struggles and my hurts sometimes with them in the same way I can share the joys, and I want them to share the same, if there's no equanimity, there's just no connection. It's not like, I mean, people use the word intimacy, but I just use the word connection. And it's like, if I can't be a true friend, and it doesn't matter if it's a parent or a sibling or a spouse, like if you can't be a true friend to someone, then to me it's like in those ways, I just am like, we're not a good match.
Exactly.
We're not a good match.
Yeah. I had to like downgrade someone too like that. They were just like an energy sucker. They, always about them, and you can't get a word in edgewise, and if you do, it's very short. It's like, oh, so how are you? Oh, but then listen to what happened to me and blah 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 blah. So I downgraded that person to cordial. So when I see them, I'm cordial,
Oh, yeah, you're fine. Of
right.
course.
Like I don't have anything
Absolutely.
against you. I'm not mad at you, but we're just not close anymore or even that cool. We're just, so that's how I kind of move through life.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and sometimes you have to forgive the person. I mean, they may not ask for forgiveness, but, like I just had to forgive that whatever they had going on was really hurtful to me. And I was like, but I'm just not going to keep like hanging on to it. I'm just going to bless it and I'm going to let it go.
Yeah.
But I also don't have to engage. I'm just not going to engage like that because it isn't how you want to be treated. And I think that's the thing is when you're a goddess woman, it's like for me every day I'm like I choose love and joy. But there's some times where I'm like there's an hour or maybe a couple days where I'm just like I'm kind of in the dumps about something and it's really hurts and it's like I just want to I might cry, I might go and be like angry or something. And I want to feel like the person and I want to really believe it that they love me as much when I'm happy as when I'm like in my humanness, I'll call it, that part of me that's like feels a little like uncertain, that feels very vulnerable, because that's how I want to be loved and that's how I will love someone else. And that's what I look for now.
Absolutely. So I love your hugging it out theory.
Yeah.
My husband
great.
does that. It's great. Like if we're like having an argument or something, or if I'm like really annoyed about something and I'm going on and on and on, he just comes over and he just like hugs me.
And for everyone listening, I'll just give the brief thing is the greatest way to reconnect with someone when you feel off or you've had a tough day or you just don't feel like you're clicking, go hug because it syncs up. It's like getting in touch with your heart like we talk with meditation. It gets you in touch with your heart and their heart and you sync up in a new way and it's so powerful. It's literally one of the fastest ways I have found to connect and get back to that higher place of you're feeling more empowered and more happy and more connected.
Yes, I love it. So you write a lot of books and I love your titles. Okay, guys, so listen to some of her titles. Goddesses Cry and Say Motherfucker. Goddesses Love Cock. Goddesses.
I had to say it because there's so much judgment around swearing and being angry as women. And I finally was like, well, we just need to call it out there.
Right.
It's okay to be angry and it's okay to cry.
And it's okay to love cock.
Oh, yeah. It's totally okay. And it's why you have all these stories about being spiritual. And I'm like, let it go.
Yes. Goddesses don't do drama. Goddesses are sexy. Goddesses eat. We eat, honey. Not that diet nonsense. We eat. We eat healthy, but we eat. Goddesses deserve the G's, which is what I was looking at, what I've, been referring to, and goddesses decide. Now, I want to ask you a second.
You forgot about Goddesses Love Cock.
No, I said that one. That's my favorite.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I said Goddesses Love Cock. So, that book. So I want to talk a little bit about sex. Because you said, what are you teaching your daughters about sex? I wanted to talk about that because I have a daughter. She's 8 years old. And I did a podcast the other day with a sex therapist. And I was kind of asking her questions about how you, approach the topic of sex. So what are some of your techniques or thoughts about, sharing with your daughters about sex?
Yeah, and this makes people squirm, right? Oh my gosh, we're not, it's really uncomfortable. I think first, if it's uncomfortable, you need to get to the causes, in yourself about why. Was it really awkward when your parents, talked to you about sex? Were you in, for me, Catholic schools in which it was all just, secrecy and shame and sin and this? And so for me, it's there's ways to be very practical and very no nonsense. Okay, this is what happens. It's important to talk about things that okay, if you do this, for example, if you have sex without birth control, then you could get pregnant, and that could, if you're not married and you're not at a time in your life where it's really supported, that could really limit you. But I think the thing is what I realized is that there's so much fear-based and shame-based teaching, and also if we have it and we bring it to the table when we talk to kids, they're absorbing that. And the thing that really struck home with me was one of the people who is she read Goddesses Love Cock, and she literally wrote me, and she's like, I stopped reading at this point where she's like, you were talking about how were you taught the sex? Was it all fear-based? Was it all shame-based? Was it all sin and this and secrecy? And nobody talked about love and joy and connection, for example. Nobody even talked about joy. That's why the divine formula is Goddess plus cock equals joy, because we've in some ways lost that. We've become so secretive or shame-based or what have you, is we don't talk about the pure joy of that beautiful connection that we have. Orgasm is just a big joy bubble, right? And it's and it connects us to the divine. And so I think with kids, it's making sure that you've cleared your stories around sex. Are there still things that make you awkward and uncomfortable? I think first, as a goddess woman, it's owning that. But I think second, so this reader goes and says, she realized as she's reading it, oh my gosh, I'm teaching my daughter the same things I've been taught, and I've never mentioned to her that it's fun and it's joyful. And so she went to her 12-year-old, and they had this beautiful 40-minute conversation in which she talked to her from her heart. She's in a way, she's I've never talked to her. And she's and I talked about it was fun. And she's and honestly, she's her daughter was so happy because she said she'd been so scared of it. There was all this stuff, and she was so happy to hear that it was fun and it was joyful.
Right.
And it was yay. I was how much more empowered is that little girl going to walk into womanhood and make that first, decision to have intimacy with a man, or even to know her body. And it's because that's the thing is, in order for us to be in our own sexuality, to own it, we really have to own those stories that go with it. And a lot of them are ones that we've picked up. We've picked it up from, the people that taught it to us. We've picked it up in the media about what it's supposed to look like. All of that. And it's just we've got to sort of shed that in order for, I think, to come and just say to our kids, hey, this is what this is about. There's nothing to be afraid of. How do we teach them empowering choices? You're really going to want to be with somebody that you care about, because this is such a beautiful thing. You're going to want to be honest and have good communication, because it's really great. And there's some things because people have their things, and you want to go and teach them to be empowered about it. Teach them to go and feel it's a good thing to look forward to, as opposed to oh my God, it's scary, or it's a dread, or I don't really have all of the information. I think that's the thing. And so, everybody's going to come to it differently, but the biggest thing is, what kind of language are you using, and what kinds of energies are you bringing? What kinds of emotions do you have around it? Like I said, I say in the book, I found out at school because I got kissed by a boy in kiss tag in 3rd grade, and I was terrified for a month and a half that I was pregnant, because I looked at movies. Movies were, if a girl got kissed, she got pregnant.
Right.
And I didn't know. I was in 3rd grade, and I was terrified. I was pregnant. And I finally confessed this on the playground. I broke down crying on the swing set, and one of the girls who has older brother, she's like, stupid, you can't get pregnant that way. You have to, have the penis and the vagina. And I was like,
oh my God.
And I went home. I didn't believe her. I went home and asked my mom, and my mom was like, well, yeah. And then I tried to ask my dad about it, and he was like, we're never talking about this again. And that kind of stuff shuts things down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think that's the thing, is to sort of, be open. Be open to doing just more than the basics. Be open. You don't have to share how, semantics, but say, I really, your dad and I love each other, and this is such a great thing. And you don't have to say that to an 8-year-old, but maybe you say that to your 13-year-old.
Right.
Yeah. Or you say that to your 15-year-old,
right.
Who's got a boyfriend, and being like, do you really trust him? Because I think the thing is, we walk into situations sometimes without really knowing, are these the best ones? And that's the thing. It's when we empower our daughters and our sons too, to make empowered decisions around their sexuality that reduces the wounding that they have, because sex can be so wounding to people, right?
Yep.
If you've ever been shamed into it, if you've ever been pressured and you haven't listened to yourself, like they've done things that you haven't liked, but you didn't like have a voice to say, like, I don't like that, that's not okay, or they didn't call you the next day, like all the stories, like there's so much wounding. You know, you don't have to tolerate that. You have to kind of decide what you deserve too, but also you can be like, I just really want the joy, and you make decisions from that place.
Yeah, I love that. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today, Ava. You are amazing.
Hey, you too, Nicole. I'm so glad we got to talk.
you.
And girl, you write your heart out. I'm telling you, there's a book like just waiting to pop.
Oh my God, I'm going to try. But before I let you go, this is the Oh Hell No podcast, and I have to ask you, tell us an Oh Hell No moment that you've had. It could be something this week, last month, anything that made you stop and say, oh hell no, what is going on here?
Oh, I've got a good one, and it's from Goddesses Deserve the G. I wanted this really fabulous job, and I interviewed with everybody that was there. They wanted me so bad. The president wasn't there, and he was the only one that didn't interview me. I mean, they flew me up. They, like, wined and dined me. I was like, I thought, this is a slam dunk. And so, but they were like, well, the president has to talk to you and all this stuff. So the president calls me, and I'd gotten so many winks, and the president offers me the same salary as I was making. And I was like, oh, hell no.
Well, good for you.
And I literally was like, and I just said, I was like, why would I leave, like, currently what is a really good position for you at the same salary? And I said, I will be the first female senior staff person in your company, and that's really a good thing for you. Right. It's going to okay, it's going to look good. And he literally just kept being like, no, you know, you're too young, you don't have enough experience, yada yada. And I'm just thinking, oh hell no. And so I finally said, well, I was like, I realize that you and I have a different opinion, and that's okay. I said, but I'm not going to take a salary that's the same salary as mine. It was really wonderful, like, learning more about your company and meeting everybody, and thanks so much. And I hung up.
Good
and I mean, I could tell he was so floored. He thought that because he thought I was young, he was doing me a favor. And I was like, oh hell no. And so that next time that I applied for another job, I flat out came to, like, she offered me the job within 5 minutes. She had lunch for me at the Ritz-Carlton, and she said, what do you want for salary? And I just said, I want $100,000. And she's like, done. And I was like, damn right.
Nice.
That's it.
Good for you.
So,
see? That's awesome. That's an awesome story. All right.
Yeah,
so
you got to believe in yourself.
Yeah, you definitely do. So tell us where we can find you. Do you have an Instagram?
Come connect with Ava, yes, in our wonderful, happy community. So, so you can get all of the books on Amazon or iBooks or Kobo or Barnes & Noble or Google Play, Google Books. There's paperback versions. There's ebook versions. There's actually I put together a free greatest hits. It's called the Goddess Guide Sampler, too, that you can download that's got, like, all of the sort of, like, some of the happiest sort of pieces that I had a reader go through them, and she was just like, these are like the best of the best. And so we put them into this great thing, also with some testimonials from other people about how the book has inspired them. One bride who hadn't seen herself as sexy, for example, who read Goddesses Are Sexy, and she just was like, oh my gosh, I can finally see myself as sexy and beautiful in my wedding dress. And it was like, yay her. Yeah. So anyway, so we've got that, and then I'm on Facebook at Author Ava Miles. I'm on Twitter, Author Ava Miles, pretty much Author Ava Miles everywhere. Instagram, positive messages. I always say Facebook is like my front porch, and, you know, like, come pull up a chair, and we'll have positive messages there. But I'll put out, I used to be a chef, so I put out lots of food photos, Goddesses Eat photos on Instagram. Wow. Have some chefs following me. So anyway, but it's like, you know, just come be part of some empowered people, and share your stories with us too, because I love that, because we're all here to support each other. I really do believe that.
Yes, we are. And she also has a website, avamiles.com, and it's a beautiful website, and you can shop and buy some iPhone cases and all types of stuff, rugs that say Goddesses Love Cock. I mean, they're cool.
Yeah, goddess swag. That's right. I love my goddess. swag. Some days I'm like, dang it, I really need more of my goddess swag t-shirt.
Yes, I love that t-shirt too. Yep. So again, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for interviewing with us, and good luck with everything that you're doing.
Oh, you too, Nicole. Thanks so much. And everybody out there, you really are like a total goddess, and I just am so excited to see you rock it.
Awesome.